Good morning, everyone. It's great to see you all. Thank you for joining us this morning to learn more about Georgia's deployment of the emergency rental assistance. Before we begin, I do have a couple of housekeeping items. Please mute yourself during the event. If you have questions, please enter them in the chat. We will make every attempt to answer questions that were submitted in advance at the time of registration during this next hour. However, we do also commit to distributing the Q&A via email to all attendees after the event. Now I will allow or ask Tanya Curry, our Deputy Commissioner of Housing, to introduce herself.
Great. Good morning, everyone, and good morning to those who are joining us. It's exciting to be here to speak with you, all of you today, and to talk about Georgia rental assistance. As you might imagine, this is a very big undertaking for the Department of Community Affairs. We're excited to have this assistance available to citizens, excuse me, citizens across the state. And today I hope to just share a little bit more about the process and about the program. I don't know if they are on the call right now, but I do want to make you aware that Cynthia Patterson is our Office Director for the Georgia Rental Assistance Program. She is our daily point of contact for the program, and should you have any questions, you'll be able to reach out to Cynthia directly. Also, for those of you who are familiar with our Housing Assistance Division, we have a new Housing Assistance Division Director. Her name is Daphne Walker, and she joined our agency yesterday. So I'm sure you all will have be excited to meet her, and we'll have an opportunity to interact with her in the future. Dave Wisnett, who is our former Housing Assistance Division Director, hasn't gone anywhere. He is the new COO for the Department of Community Affairs. So I just wanted to give that update because if you have a little bit of questions or any questions after this, or if you actually submit your applications for the Georgia Rental Assistance Program, you'll be able to reach out to Cynthia or Daphne or any of our staff members in the Housing Assistance Division with questions. Next slide, please. And so you all know, as Jill said, I'm Tanya Curry, Deputy Commissioner. That means I'm responsible not only for the LIHTC related programs and our community development related programs, but housing programs, but also home ownership and housing assistance. And of course, the Georgia Rental Assistance Program falls under our Housing Assistance Division. At DCA, as you all know, our mission and goal is to help build strong, vibrant communities. And these funds that we're receiving for rental assistance, as well as mortgage assistance, which we're not talking too much about mortgage assistance today, but for rental assistance, help us do just that. Next slide, please. So here's our agenda for the day. There's a lot of information, but I'm excited because I know that it's going to be very straightforward and self-explanatory for you all. Many of you all may have already started the process of applying for the program, and so this presentation will hopefully clarify any questions that you have. But we're going to go through a little bit of an overview, a timeline. We're going to talk about how the financial assistance is provided, the process, as well as who can apply. Next slide, please. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just give a little bit of background. And Grace, you can advance this entire slide because I'm going to talk about this for just a little bit. As most of you know, the United States Treasury Department allocated $25 billion with a B, dollars to states and local governments. And so out of that huge allocation, Georgia received about $552 million in stimulus funds for the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. And I'm going to talk just about how that 552 has been distributed across the state. These funds, as you know, are intended to provide relief to landlords and tenants who are behind on rental assistance and utility payments due to the coronavirus pandemic. And you can go ahead and advance grace to the communities. So what I want to talk a little bit about, because we did receive questions in advance, I want to talk about the group of counties that received direct funding for the ERA program. You can see them here listed on the presentation. They include the City of Atlanta and the larger counties that are listed here. The counties that are listed here have over 200,000 in population or more, and so they received direct funding from U.S. Treasury for their emergency rental assistance programs. All of these programs that you see listed here are either in the process of standing up their program or they've already started their program. A lot of the questions that people ask related to, well, why did my area only get so much funding? We don't have all of the details on that except to say that it was a population-based formula that Treasury utilized. However, that's not going to be a problem for the state of Georgia or frankly for any other state. In Georgia, we do have quite a few more jurisdictions than other states, but all of the entities that you see listed here are working together to administer our rental assistance programs. And I want to be clear, it's not one program. Everyone has their individual program, but we're working together to make it seamless for all of the communities listed here and the jurisdictions listed here. So what does that mean? For example, in Chatham County, they received, I believe, about $8 million. Well, obviously, they're going to have more than $8 million worth of need in their community. As soon as those funds are expended in any of these 12 jurisdictions, the Department of Community Affairs is going to start funding ERA applications in those other communities. So it's not a problem that, say, the City of Atlanta or Augusta Richmond or Chatham or Cherokee or any of the entities here only received so much money or that they've run out of money, because our plan and our communications that we're having with them are to start funding in those areas as soon as their funds are expended. And our hope is that that's going to be a seamless process whereby, for example, if you're applying in Chatham County, the website would redirect you directly to our website where applicants can apply. So there's not a problem with jurisdictions not receiving the total amount of funding for the need that may be in their particular area. I want to make that perfectly clear because there are a lot of questions about that and questions about how all of this is going to work together. I will add that the jurisdictions that you see listed here, we have a bi-weekly call where we're talking and communicating about the status of the programs so that we'll be ready to accept those applications as soon as the funding has been depleted. Let's see. So moving on to DCA's program. DCA has created an online application process for landlords and tenants to apply to receive the funding. Next slide, please. And so before I get into how it works, just to give you a little bit of background, the program started in March. It will end on September 30th, 2021. When we first started the program, we thought that it was going to be ending on September 30th, 2020. I'm sorry, it's going to end on 2022. We thought that it was going to be ending on 2021, but Treasury quickly allowed and extended that time frame to allow for the distribution of all of these funds. And so we're not on as tight a time frame as we were when we first started, but we are still working as feverishly as we can to get these funds out and distributed across the state. Next slide. Okay, so what assistance are we providing? And Grace, you can advance to fill that slide. I'm going to talk a little bit about these two different categories. The biggest category of assistance that we're providing is past due support. And this is past due support that includes rental arrears as well as utility arrears. So again, past due support is the biggest category of funding that we're providing. Each tenant can receive up to 12 months or $15,000 of rental and utility assistance. Okay, so up to 12 months and no more than $15,000. No arrearages can be addressed prior to March 13th. So that's the date the Treasury has set, and that's the date, that's our starting point. So as we get further into the presentation, we're going to talk a little bit about how the application process works and how the portal works, but the arrearages that are going to be input have to be March 30th or after, and it cannot exceed 12 months except in special circumstances, and it cannot exceed $15,000 per rental unit. Okay, so future rental assistance cannot be provided unless arrearages are also addressed. So you can't be providing or seeking future payments if there were no arrearages. And also the total amount of assistance, again, cannot exceed 12 months. On the future support side, we are allowed per the legislation to provide up to 3 months of assistance. And so that would be a situation where a tenant, for example, has been in arrears for all this time for the past 12 months, and they perhaps need 1 or 2 or 3 additional payments to help them stay in their homes and also get back on their feet. But that is a hardship case, and that requires additional documentation. And of course, as the note says at the bottom, all of this assistance is based on remaining availability of funding. But at this point, the great news is that we've got plenty of funding available to fund past due rent across the state of Georgia. Next slide, please. Okay, couple of important things. The money is paid directly to landlords and directly to utility companies. Payments are not made directly to tenants except in extreme extenuating circumstances where a landlord is basically just not responsive to the application process. The monies, again, are paid directly to landlords and utility companies on behalf of the tenants. Okay, that's an important point because sometimes we have tenants calling or tenants applying, and they're waiting to have the landlord side of the transaction connected. And we absolutely want landlords to connect and provide the documentation and verification that will support payments going directly to them. But sometimes they don't for a variety of reasons. So again, we have a special circumstance where we can pay tenants directly, but the portal and the system is set up to pay landlords and utility companies. Next slide, please. All right, so who is eligible for assistance? This is an important slide. A renter has to be a household living in Georgia, obviously, with earnings that are no more than 80% of the current area median income. And so we're all familiar with that definition, so that's one piece. They also have to have qualified for unemployment benefits or have experienced a loss of a reduction in household income that has been directly or indirectly related to COVID-19. There is a certification or an attestation that the tenant has to provide for that hardship circumstance. But we found since we opened the portal that that has not been a problem for tenants to provide, and they've typically been able to provide unemployment benefits as well as other documentation to evidence their COVID-19 hardship. They also have to demonstrate a risk of homelessness or housing instability by providing one of the 3 things that you see listed here. A pending eviction notice or something related to eviction notice, a past due rent notice, or a past due utility notice. So you can see that those 3 things, those 3 pieces of evidence are probably going to be pretty easy for tenants to provide if they are in a rental arrearage situation. But they do have to have certain income limits. They have to have qualified for unemployment benefits or completed the hardship attestation. And they have to demonstrate that they have had some sort of housing instability that is evidenced by one of the 3 things that you see listed here. Next slide, please. Again, I touched on this just a little bit. The tenant can apply or the landlord can initiate the application. And I want to be clear with that because that's a point that sometimes is a little bit confusing to both sides and sometimes confusing to the tenant side. Both the tenant or the landlord can initiate the application. However, both sides will have to provide verification and documentation of the monies that are being requested. So, for example, if a tenant initiates the application, they're going to put in all they're going to go to the portal and click on the tenant application button, and then they're going to start from there, and they're going to put in all of the information that they can. The portal is then going to send a communication to the landlord that the tenant provided and ask them to start submitting their side of the transaction. Likewise, a landlord can start the application process and submit their information, and then the tenant will receive information to provide their documentation. And so that was actually one of the questions that I think someone asked is there a way that the processes can sync up to make the process run a little bit smoother? That's actually exactly how the system has been designed, so that both sides put in their information, and the software that we have utilized actually combines those applications. And so it is it's a very kind of straightforward process, but as you can see, the breakdown comes where maybe one side doesn't respond or one side doesn't submit all their applications. And as we get a little bit further on, I'm going to talk about the individuals and the DCA staff that are working on processing, and really we call it underwriting, but it's really reconciling all of this information in a way that we have a complete file that can be processed and presented for payment. Next slide, please. I think I covered this a little bit. This is the second piece. This is the tenant side, and as I said, a landlord or a tenant can apply, and those applications will be connected and then reconciled through our processing. Next slide, please. All right, so I've alluded to how to apply, but we're going to get into a little bit more details on how the process flows. Next slide. All right, so when a landlord agrees to participate in the program, they're also agreeing that they're not going to accept additional payments or seek additional payments from a tenant to, satisfy arrearages that may have accrued over the past 12 months. That seems pretty straightforward and obvious, but we like to state it and make it clear. There's no process for double dipping here. The monies that we are paying are on behalf of the tenants. And so we like to make sure that that's clear, that the tenant is going to be made whole and made current, and then the landlord is not going to pursue those eviction proceedings based on these particular arrearages. Obviously, landlords have the ability and the legal right to pursue whatever actions they may need to relating to their properties. But once we satisfy these arrearages, there can't be a separate action for these same months and amounts of monies that may have been due. So the documentation that's required for landlords is going to include things like, obviously, proof of identity of the person who's completing the application, proof of ownership, which can include some of the things that you see listed here: warranty deeds, current tax records, insurance minders, etc. And sometimes, it's particularly where it's a larger landlord, a property management company may be authorized to implement or to start this process on behalf of the owner. They're going to need to provide a statement of delinquent rent, an IRS W-9 form, as well as an ACH direct deposit form. And all of those things are important because we've got to verify who we're paying, and we've got to have accurate information on how to pay them. And you would be surprised how many times we get ACH payment forms that are either not complete or maybe they put the wrong account number or something like that. So the information that you provide from the landlord side, the more accurate it is, the better off it is for the process, because what happens is if it's not accurate or if any information is missing, it's going to get lodged with a processor or with an underwriter, and there's going to be follow-up. People are going to be contacting you for that additional information, because again, we're trying to reconcile and put together 2 complete files, one for the landlord, one for the tenant, with all the information that we need to proceed to payment. Next slide, please. A few other pieces of landlord documentation include, obviously, a valid tax identification number, EIN number, and then if utilities are included, if they're utilities that are covered by the landlord, then we're going to need to have documentation related to that. And then there's an attestation document that signs off on all of the legal things that I just mentioned about not seeking eviction proceedings for payments that have already been made. Legal fees or other charges that may be included in costs that the landlord is seeking from a tenant may not be included. You can submit them, and it would be best to submit them in a separate way if you'd like for them to be considered, but legal fees and late fees are not going to be considered. We have found that landlords have creative ways of communicating or charging certain things. Everybody doesn't charge it the same way. So we do want to allow for people to have a dialogue with us about what particular costs are that they're submitting. But if it's legal fees in particular, those are not going to be covered. In order to participate in the program, the landlords have to waive any types of legal fees. Late fees are allowed if they were incurred due to COVID-19. And they're limited to 8% of the total arrearages. So that is another thing. So that's where I was saying, you know, just however a landlord documents late fees or other fees or those types of things, the best thing you can do as a landlord is provide as much clear documentation about what it is that you're trying to be reimbursed for. Next slide, please. Landlords, so here's a couple of other additional considerations. Landlords that have tenants that receive certain monthly federal subsidies, things like housing choice vouchers and things like that, at this time are not receiving GRA assistance. However, I want to say very clearly to the group that's listening to this call, we're not saying that that is a forever situation. We're saying right now that's not being processed through the portal. We are working on the portal modifications that will allow for certain monthly federal subsidy payments. So that's an important thing, because that was not the case when we first opened the portal, but we've received guidance from Treasury that these types of payments are to be considered and included. And so we've got to do some adjustments to our portal to accept these types of applications. Households that reside in a LIHTC property or a home assisted property are able to receive a portion for the portion of the rent that the tenant is responsible to cover. Okay, that's probably the most important piece for many of the people that are on this call. And so we are very excited, and we hope that all of our LIHTC and home assisted properties that are eligible to seek reimbursement through this program will seek that reimbursement, because it really is a benefit to both the property owners as well as the tenants. And it does take a little bit of work. It may require you to assign a particular staff member or someone to gather this information together and put it together, or maybe be the person who's the inputter into the portal. But we really do think that it's worthwhile for you to do this. And frankly, the LIHTC and the home assisted property owners are probably some of the people that are best equipped to gather the information and put it together in a format that is, will put together a responsive application on both sides. So we want to be very clear that this is available to those categories. It's not yet available to monthly federal subsidy properties, but we are working on it, and that will be an update that will be provided as soon as we can. Households that live in a unit where the landlord has a family relationship to anyone in the household may be eligible, but they have to provide that it's a true landlord-tenant relationship. Okay, so that's important because a landlord may have a property, a family member may be living there, but the family member pays rent, and it's a true landlord-tenant relationship. We want to make sure that those people are also paid and covered. Next slide, please. Okay, on the renter side, and this is important. Again, this is primarily, I think we've got a lot of landlords as well as community organizations and some of our partner agencies on this call, but it's so that was a lot of the landlord information, but the tenant information or the renter information is also very important. Renters are going to need to provide a photo ID, and you see some examples here listed on the slide. Also, they're going to have to provide proof of their renter status, some sort of lease, some sort of certification, evidence of a utility payment at a particular location, a landlord attestation. That could be a letter from a landlord saying this person is my tenant and they have lived here from X date to X date, et cetera, et cetera. They've not been able to pay their rent for this period of time. Proof or risk of homelessness or housing instability. Again, we covered this in one of the earlier slides. It could be an eviction notice, a past due rent notice, past due utilities, those types of things. Income documentation for household members. That could be an attestation in limited circumstances. So what we mean there are pay stubs or W-2s or things like that, or anything that documents the income of that household. And then verification of the hardship related to COVID-19. And if you're applying for utility assistance, obviously the things that would evidence, rent due, past due rent, past due notices, those types of things. And we obviously would need the utility provider and the account number, etc. Next slide, please. So when the documentation is submitted, you can imagine, again, it's not, although these are set categories of information, we're receiving them in all different shapes, sizes, and formats. People are uploading things, taking pictures with their phones. It might not be a clear picture. There are all sorts of reasons why things may or may not be sufficient. And so, as I mentioned, we have processors and underwriters who are working these applications and troubleshooting these applications as they come in. You can go ahead and advance, Grace. Great. So the processors are the individuals who are receiving the applications in the first instance. As soon as they get into the portal, they're assigned to a queue of a processor. Oh, and I should have mentioned that DCA has brought on hundreds of staff to work this program. And for those of you who are familiar with DCA, you probably know we are a lean, mean machine. We don't really have a lot of staff members. So we have brought on close to 200 additional staff members to work this program. We don't want anyone to think that, we're working it with our existing staff. And we've taken on space, not in our normal location. We've taken on space in another state building, and that's where those people are housed. And so the processors are receiving the applications in the first instance, reviewing them to make sure that the documentation is there, and they're the first group that starts looking at, is there something incomplete? Is there something missing? Is there something I can't read? Does something need to be resubmitted? All of those types of things. They start that troubleshooting, and they continue to work it to a certain status before it goes on to an underwriter. So they have about 10 days to provide, tenants have about 10 days to provide the correct information or documentation for the application to be considered complete. If an application is not responsive, either on the landlord or the tenant side, after 10 days, DCA, we kind of reserve the right to continue holding that application, but we're really moving on to other applications that are coming in to start the processing of them. So we don't want to delay the process for people that are putting their applications in and maybe providing complete applications. So the processors, they have a queue that they're looking at on a regular basis. And at that 10th day or so, those applications are kind of rolling a little bit lower down in their queue in order for the processing to occur. And as documentation comes in, then they're able to go back and review and complete those applications. And I'm trying to describe how it works just a little bit so you all have an idea, but it really is a very automated process and a system that was built just for rental assistance. We're utilizing a software for a company that specializes in working with housing finance agencies. They understand our business very well, and they're doing this for many other states and jurisdictions that receive these funds, and they have worked on other types of federal assistance programs in the past. So we've been very pleased with the work that they've helped us do to stand up this portal to get this money out across the state. So again, you've got about a tenant or a landlord has about 10 days to have that communication, 10 business days to have that communication, submit the documentation. And if it doesn't, we're not dismissing the application because we know somebody may come back at a time later, but we are moving on to applications that are coming in on a daily basis. Next slide, please. Applications are only able to be reviewed by the underwriter when they're complete. So the processors are receiving them, checking to make sure all of the applications are in. They do not flow to the underwriter until they are determined to be complete by the processor. And again, that's an automated process. That file is submitted automatically onto the underwriting process for the next level of review before it is submitted for payment. Next slide. Oh, I didn't realize, well, I was already to my end slide there. So the format that we have here today is a little bit new to us and exciting, but we appreciate you all submitting your questions and in advance because it allows us just to kind of tie it all in and tailor the presentation a little bit. As Jill said in the beginning, we are going to respond to all the questions that have been answered, and we'll submit the answers back to everyone who attended today. But I do want to just go back through the questions just a little bit that we received to make sure there aren't any questions that stood out a little bit that were a little bit different than what we've presented. One of the first questions we received is, how can owners recap monies owed by tenants where the tenant will not do the application? Well, certainly the landlord has the most information to start this process, and it is in the best interest of both the landlord and the tenant to complete the application, right? But we encourage landlords to submit as much information as they can, because they may even have the documentation that a tenant submitted that said, for example, I'm unemployed. I'm not paying because I'm unemployed. Here's some evidence of that. So whatever documentation a landlord has, they are able to submit on behalf of this transaction, and that will help the tenant. Of course, there are going to be documents that a tenant is going to have to provide, and our staff will be seeking that information and communicating with tenants to help them understand that it's in their best interest to provide the information. But landlords are able to submit as much information as they have to complete what is required, not only on their side, but also on the tenant side. They can't complete everything. There is going to be an attestation and a verification that tenants have to receive, and there may be documentation that the landlord does not have. But if they have it, they can submit it on behalf of the tenant. We talked a lot about all the types of documentation that can be submitted to evidence the need, so I won't go through that. There is a mail-in and paper application process. It is available on the portal. And if I didn't say it already, I should have said it many times by now, but the portal is Georgia Rental Assistance, GeorgiaRentalAssistance.org. And so, no, I'm sorry, .gov. And so that is where you can find all of this information, as well as the paper application process. The paper application is also available in several languages. So we've got all that information there. It's either, there's a tab that says languages, and that's where you can find translations of certain documents, including the application. And then there's a frequently asked question tab where we update and keep all the information current as things change or as we add information for the public that is submitting. One thing that's going to be important for this group, and we will make sure that we send it out to all applicants along with the question and answer, is our outreach kit. And so the outreach kit includes everything that you might need to know about the program in digital format, frequently asked questions, press releases, things like banners. If you want to put information about the Georgia Rental Assistance Program in your newsletters, anything like that is available in our outreach kit, and it's all digital. And so we will send that as well to all of the participants on this call. One question I get sometimes is, well, we don't see or hear a lot of information about the rental assistance program where we live here in the metro area. And that's because, again, we're trying not to confuse the public too much about these different pots of money. You may recall at the beginning of the presentation, I talked about the other jurisdictions that receive funds. And so they're advertising their programs. The city of Atlanta is advertising, Fulton County's advertising, all of our metro Atlanta counties are advertising. But if you get out across the state, we've got billboards, PSAs, banners, flyers, you name it, we've got them everywhere. And again, as soon as those other jurisdictions expend their funds, at some point, probably later in this year, this will become more of a statewide program because those jurisdictions will have expended all their funds and the state will start utilizing our funds in those other areas. In fact, we know of at least 2 or 3 of those jurisdictions that we're going to start doing that, expending additional funds soon. So,
Tanya.
Yes.
With regards to those other jurisdictions,
Yes.
Are they updating their website to indicate that they are out of funds, or will we ever update our website to reflect that?
Yes, they will be updating their websites. If you were to go, I'm just going to use Savannah. And again, if anybody's on the call from Savannah, this is not a real example. I really don't know the exact status right now of their funds, but let's assume that Savannah, who got $8 million, has done a great job and got all those funds reserved, if you will. That's a word we like to use, reserved for applicants. So they know that they've got need that equals more than that 8 million. Then we're going to have those communications with that jurisdictions. And that, as I said, we meet bi-weekly. I have a call on Friday with those jurisdictions. And it's different in every jurisdiction. So we can't say it's going to be the same way everywhere. But whatever that process is going to be in that jurisdiction, we will be working with them. So if they tell us, hey, we want to put up Georgia rental assistance information on our website when people go to our website, that's going to be great. It's going to be and that's going to be our preference. We're going to want people to put up our information so that it's kind of seamless for an applicant that's going there.
Okay, so as a follow-up,
yep,
to you, Tanya, if possible, whenever during those biweekly calls you discover a jurisdiction has committed all of the funds, if we get informed, we can put that information out via one of our blasts to let our community know that Chatham County, we are now providing rental assistance to Chatham County, in your example.
Yep, that's a great, and we will certainly do that. That's a great idea. And just to mention a few minutes on outreach and marketing, this money that we've received for rental assistance and the monies that we're receiving for mortgage assistance are really just once in a lifetime funding that's going to really change the landscape of housing across the state if we utilize it and if we get the funds to the people that need it, and if we play all our cards right and get all these funds out, it's going to be really raise the lifestyles and the households of people across the state. And so in that regard, we've spent some of the portions of our admin money on our advertising as well as our outreach. And we've got communications that have gone out now probably to tens of thousands of constituent groups across the state just to make them aware of the rental assistance program. So not only our partners, like all of you on this call, but everyone else that we can possibly reach out to, faith organizations, community organizations, school districts, you name it. We are pushing this information out across the state so that it can reach both tenants and landlords really wherever they are, because obviously there are going to be some pretty large landlords and they're going to be small mom and pop landlords, but this money is available to everyone. Let's see. Someone asked, will we receive a notification when a tenant enrolls and vice versa? And the answer is yes. If a landlord applies and says, I'm applying for this tenant, and they put in accurate contact information for a tenant is going to get an email that says, hey, XYZ landlords, this person says they're your landlord and they've applied for assistance and you need to do these things. And it's kind of an automated process. It's very straightforward, which brings me to another point that we have found related to the program. It's been very interesting for us because since really since before March, since the end of December, as we started making plans for these funds, when we opened the portal, we came to realize that people really have felt like this program is just too good to be true. They feel like it's a scam, kind of like the car warranty calls you get. You know, they're like, no one can be trying to pay my rent. And we are really trying to get the word out across the state that this is a credible program, that this is a real program, that these are real funds, that this is not a scam, that these monies are available to everyone across the state. So as you share this information with your networks and with your tenants and everyone that you interact with, please help them understand that this is a 100% credible program funded by the federal government, administered by the state of Georgia, and it is a real thing. It is not in any way a scam. Regarding fraud, obviously we are attuned and alert, and we've got all sorts of technology built into the portal to limit and to ferret out any type of fraud, waste, and abuse. Because at the end of the day, the state of Georgia is responsible for the compliance related to these funds. And so we take that very, very seriously. There have been incidents, unfortunately, where we've had a couple of things that have hit our radar and we've realized that maybe people are not really landlords or people are not really tenants and that type of thing. But we do have systems in place to safeguard that. And so that's important to note as well. Let's see what else. A couple of people asked if PHAs are eligible for these funds. I did mention that our system is not set up for that right now, but we are working toward that. And that is going, because you can imagine that it's a partial payment of a calculated payment and all these types of things. So we've got to get the system set to accept those types of applications as well.
Tanya, is it accurate that the W-9 is required for all landlords because this payment will be made via direct deposit?
That is correct.
No checks, correct?
So checks are not our preferred method. Checks are very difficult to handle in the system. The system is an application to payment system. And so if you want to get your money quickly, you need to get in the process, provide complete information, including your ACH information, because a payment by check has to go through some very manual processes. It is really outside of the system, and we have to provide it because you know, we're certainly wanting to make sure that these funds reach every individual. And there could easily be a small landlord who's not set up to receive monies that way, who does not receive the monies that way. And we're not discounting anyone in this process. Everyone is eligible. If you are a have a small, if you're renting a rental property that you have and you only have 2 tenants, we need for you to get paid. ACH is the preferred and the best format for that, but there is a process, a very limited process for checks outside of the portal.
Thank you.
Well, I think I'm not up to all of my time, I don't think, but I think I have covered pretty much everything there is to say right now about rental assistance. I hope I have been responsive and answered the questions that you all have had. I know that there are a variety of folks on the call listening live, but we really do want for all of our landlords, all our different types of landlords to engage in this process and start the process. If you have a staff person that you can assign to start getting this ball rolling for your property or your properties, plural, that's probably the best way to get started. If you need some assistance on our end, please call our hotline number, which is available on the portal. I won't try to say it right now, and I should have it in front of me, but I don't. But call our hotline number and they will put you in touch with someone who can provide assistance. But all of our processors and our underwriters, if you receive a call from either one of them, it doesn't matter. They're probably not going to identify themselves one way or the other. They're just going to say they're calling from Georgia Rental Assistance. They are very skilled and have been working in this program night and day around the clock, and they can answer any questions that you might have about the program. We appreciate the work that you all are doing to participate in this program. We participate the leniency and the grace that you've given to tenants over this pandemic time period. We know that it has not been easy for landlords to bear that burden. And we really, really, really want to get this money back into the Georgia economy and directly to landlords who are due and owed this money. So please, if you haven't started your application process, if you haven't assigned anybody to look into it and start figuring out all the arrearages that are due, please get that started today, and we'll look forward to receiving those applications. One thing I probably did not say is that we're also working with many of our partner agencies that, some of the bigger ones like Salvation Armies across the state, but all of the agencies that that work with us on our housing initiatives and housing assistance initiatives. We're working with many of them to they're out in the community helping applicants complete applications. So we also have a list of those community partners who are working with us to help applicants. So say, for example, the Salvation Army may say, we're doing rental assistance applications on a Saturday afternoon. They may have a session like that, or they may receive calls from individuals that need rental assistance. And if they need help filling out the application, then they're helping them do that. So we have that in place. We are also working with Georgia Legal Services. Georgia Legal Services has coverage throughout the state in all but 5 counties of the state. And so if eviction proceedings have already started or not really started, but have been filed, because we know the moratorium is still in place, they should not be going forward. But landlords obviously have the ability to file to kind of get in that queue. Then Georgia Legal Services are going to be working to help reconcile that process as it proceeds toward a legal action. And basically the hope is that those cases can be settled before they really even get too further along in the process. And Georgia Legal Services is there to help confirm the amounts, reconcile the amounts, complete the settlement process. And so you may see them involved in some of the transactions in your areas from time to time. We've also communicated all this information out to magistrate courts throughout the state. And of course, that's the level of court that usually deals with the beginning of eviction proceedings and that type of thing. So we're trying to cover all our bases and make sure that everyone really knows that this money is available and that they should get in contact with us if they have any questions or ideas about how to get it to those who are in need.
Tanya, do you have time for 2 or 3 additional questions?
Sure.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. So one of the biggest concerns that I've noticed via the chat and then also in the questions submitted in advance is a concern about not knowing if a tenant is doing their part or not. Are landlords able to see where the delay is or what the status is on any given application of their own?
Yes, that's a great question, and thank you all for asking that. There actually is a process in the portal where landlords and tenants can see the application, the status of the application. So it's probably not going to say X tenant hasn't submitted this document, but it is going to say awaiting documentation from tenant. So they will get a high level of status because that's the way the system is built, and it also helps us kind of prioritize and sort, if you will, applications that have come in. But both on the landlord and the tenant side, the tenant can see if a landlord has not submitted information, and a landlord can see if a tenant has not submitted information.
Okay, very helpful. And then once both parties enter all necessary information, have you been able to determine like an average time frame for disbursement? Or are we still too new in the process to give out averages?
You know, we're a little bit new in the process, and you know, I'm just going to go ahead and say to this group, because we get asked this question every day by the media. You know, I just got off this call with the I don't know, some other what were we? I think you were on there, Grace. You may have been on there. Atlanta Housing Task Force. So, yes. So, you know, everybody's talking about rental assistance. Everybody thinks they know what's going on. You know, don't believe the hype, people. Just come to the source. I will just go ahead and give you some exact information. We don't have a good average. We are processing them as quickly as we have complete applications. We have received about 16,000 applications where a tenant has submitted something or a landlord has submitted something. We have a little under 3,000 where both sides match up. Okay, so 16 total combinations of some landlords, some tenants, but only a little under 3,000. It might be about 2,800 where both sides have matched up. So that's the number that our team is working off of, because obviously we're trying to process the complete applications as soon as we can. We've put out, I think we've, I don't want to say how much we have funded, but we have funded millions of dollars so far. But we've got $550 million to expend. And so we've got a long ways to go, and we've got a lot of money to get out the door, but we would really hope that we are processing them as quickly as we can. And again, we're pleased that the process is seamless from application through ACH payment to make that happen as quickly as possible.
Wonderful.
Anything
Thank
else?
you. No, I'm good. Grace, do you have any questions?
I think we've covered most of what came in through the Q&A.
There is one question
we will address.
That's been submitted a few times. This money is available for both affordable and conventional properties as long as the residents' income qualify at 80% AMI or less.
That is correct. That is correct. This income, as long as they meet the income requirements and the other verification requirements related to housing instability, those tenants are going to be eligible. So really, I'm looking for a surge of applications from the group that's on the call right now. And if you all have any questions, don't ask Grace and Jill or anybody in housing finance, although Grace will probably be very helpful in getting you to the right person. But really, please ask those of us on the housing assistance side, and we're going to get some information out to you following this call with our answers to the Q&A, and as well as our outreach kit and how to contact us if you have any questions. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Tanya. Thank you, Grace. Have a good day, everybody.
Bye-bye.